All right, welcome to Industry Innovators, the show where we unpack how leaders are building, scaling, and future-proofing their businesses. I'm your host, Aaron Park. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by Matt Lavinder, founder and president of New Again Houses, a real estate redevelopment and technology franchise with over 45 plus locations and growing coast to coast. New Again Houses has been recognized with numerous accolades by Franchise Business Review, Entrepreneur, and much more for its incredible momentum and franchise satisfaction, and is continually to expand throughout the country. So today we'll dive into Matt's journey and the exciting innovations at New Again Houses and his insights on the future of real estate redevelopment and the technologies that are being used. Matt, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
All right. So to get us started, would you care to share a bit about your journey and how it all fits into the bigger picture at New Again Houses?
Yeah, I mean, the story of the growth of the business is intertwined with the personal story. But I got started in real estate like most people do, just dabbling in it on the side. And I quickly realized that is really difficult to have a competitive advantage if you're not doing some degree of volume. And so, most of this industry has historically been mom and pops flipping houses and rental properties. And that was never my why as flipping a house. I wanted to build a business around this particular product of transforming real estate. And that's where I saw the challenge and the opportunity. And so I knew early on that in order to do that, we had to leverage technology and a lot of other things: capital, technology, analysis, lead generators. There's just so many pieces that go into scaling this business. And so that eventually led to franchising.
All right, awesome. I did have a question for you. So for listeners who are relatively new to your brand, how would you say your model differs from traditional house flipping and other real estate franchises?
Yeah, I think traditional real estate investing is just very difficult to scale, like especially what we do, which is single family residences. We're flipping or we're doing it and then holding it. It's still a lot of construction. And this particular business is very, very difficult to scale. And so you see a lot of the big players who build houses, build new construction across the country, and they've scaled that business and they have tried to apply that to remodeling and what we do. And it's extremely difficult because there are so many decisions to make on a remodel. Every product is different. Every analysis is different. They're all unique. So it's very difficult to scale this business like new construction. And so what you end up with is a very fragmented, decentralized industry. And that's difficult. But then in order to do it well, you have to do volume. And so what we're trying to do is create the competitive advantages to scale at the franchise level, and then empower our franchise owners to be the local boots on the ground that lead that business in their local market.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. Now, as a consumer, I know you kind of mentioned you're trying to equip the franchise owners with the proper tools and analysis. It's funny how you were kind of talking about that. I was just thinking to myself, my wife and I, we did want to go through a remodel process for our own home, but we were kind of stuck in this analysis paralysis. So we've spoke to different contractors, for example, but unfortunately, like sometimes what ends up happening is a contractor might only do the countertops, but they don't want to touch the cabinets. And so there's a lot of that and try to figure out and navigate.
You look at real estate and you just look at the fundamental business model is adding value to real property, right? And every segment of business has been fundamentally changed by technology in the last 100 years, except for a single family remodel, right? Like you look at the job site on a single family where value is being added in 2025. It's not that different than 1975 or 1950. The difference is maybe the tools have batteries now where they used to be plugged into a wall, but technology has had very little effect on that job site. And I think real estate is unique that way because there's room for technology to really increase the effectiveness and the efficiency in real estate. But technology can't do it by itself because this is the built world. And at the center of it, you've got a contractor who is a human being who may or may not be able to use technology. It's a very interesting business when you start talking about technology in this space. And that's why it's so difficult to scale.
No, I 100% agree with you there. I know currently, especially in the past couple of years, a lot of people are very hyped about things like AI and automation, for example. But ultimately, I agree with you. I think we have to have humans at the center, no matter what system we have. So, no, I definitely appreciate that insight that you've given me there. So I did want to go into sort of what your day to day looks like. I know you're balancing your franchise growth, you're managing your franchise network. There's other things you're kind of doing on the side as well. And then there's also the technology that you're growing within your business. So what does that your day to day look like?
Yeah, franchising teaches you a lot of things that I think are very difficult to learn in other businesses because franchising, once it gets traction, it tends to grow very quickly. And it grows quickly because you are leveraging franchise owners' capital and their time rather than having to hire employees. And so when a franchise system gets traction, it grows really fast. That's one of the upsides of this business model. But as a founder, your time doesn't increase exponentially with the growth, right? And so you still only have X amount of hours that you want to put into the business. And so I made a very conscious decision that I was going to put boundaries around my work life. And that meant boundaries around the hours I was going to put into it. And so as it's grown, those hours, I can't increase those hours without taking away from my personal life. So it's like, how do you make more out of this finite amount of hours? And about 5 years ago, it's really under the crunch as franchising was growing. And so I really embraced time blocking. And so I started approaching my hours like I would dollars. I have so many of them. I'm going to budget this many for this many for that. And I was very deliberate with that. And that was a game changer for me. So I allocate hours for every person, either an hour a week, an hour every other week, an hour a month, sometimes an hour a quarter. I got very deliberate with that. And that was a game changer for me. It forced me to be very disciplined with my time.
Yeah, no, I know a very common saying is time is your most valuable commodity, right? So yeah, it definitely is difficult to manage, I would say, because with money, for example, you can always make more, but you can't make more time, right? So.
Yep, that is the case. And we say that flippantly, like time is our most valuable, but I don't know that we always treat it like it's the most valuable. Like we're much better at budgeting our dollars at the beginning of the year than we are budgeting our time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it does sound like you built more than just a franchise. There's like a real system and ecosystem behind all of this. You know, software development, training, probably equity fund for projects, your lead generation, you mentioned national partnerships. Which piece would you say has moved the needle the most for you or the franchise owners lately?
Well, at the center of our business, because we're a franchise business, at the center of our business is the franchise owner. And so our entire job and business model is to set a franchise owners up for success. And so then the question becomes, what do those franchise owners need to be successful? Right. And so when you look at what does a franchise owner need to be able to do, for success for us is for that franchise owner to be doing one house a month. So 12 a year. Some of them do a lot more than that, but that gives you a competitive advantage when you can do one a month. You have enough volume on a local level to have a financial upside and harness competitive advantages. So 12 a year. What does a franchise owner need? That is our North Star. So it's not what I enjoy building. That's not the question. It's what does that franchise owner need to be successful in that? And what we've identified is off-market lead generation systems, because owners don't have time to do marketing in addition to all that other things that they have to do. And it's a competitive world out there. So we have to create competitive advantages in lead generation, analysis, and that's where the software comes from. And then capital capital can be a limitation. So we've actually built our own capital fund that funds all of our projects around the country. And so we have that fund, which really helps the scale. And then there's the construction itself and building that construction ecosystem. And it's really difficult to say any one of those is more important than the others. Because when you're scaling real estate in this business, all four of those things have to be operating at a high level. And if any one of the four is not operating at that level, the others fall apart. So you can have everything else in place and you don't have capital, then it all falls apart. You can have them all in place and you don't get the off-market lead generation, nothing else works. And so that has been the challenge, is building all four of those competitive advantages at the same time.
Yeah, you've given us a list of things that, all have to work together in order to make everything work for a franchise owner. Would you say you ever had to make a recent decision or trade-off in order to shape the next stage of growth for New Again houses as a franchise?
Yeah, man, you're always making choices. And for us, a lot of the pressure in the franchise world is volume, like the number of locations. And so there's a real pressure in this industry to increase your number of units. So when you go to a franchising conference, for example, it's like everybody's identity is how many units they have. Real estate's a little bit different because it's a low volume business and quality is more important than quantity. And so just doing more locations or more units is not necessarily successful for us. It's the quality of those units and it's the quality of those deals is more important than the quantity. If we were selling hamburgers, then unit volume would be very, very important. For real estate, it's just different. Like you're talking about locations who do 12 transactions a year. Like what other business model only does 12 transactions a year, right? And so the quality of those 12 transactions is more important than whether you do 14 or you do 8, right? It's unique that way. So we've really had to make a internal choice that we are not going to be measured by quantity, like the quantity of locations that we have. And instead, we're going to really focus on quality. And that's an easy thing to say, but a very difficult thing to do in franchising.
Yeah, in practice, I can imagine it'll be very difficult to do. You did touch a bit about the industry overall. And, with real estate, I feel like the industry and the market is always shifting quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
That could be from rates, inventory dynamics, right? Investor behavior. What are some of the major shifts that you're seeing right now with residential redevelopment and also franchising overall?
Yeah. Well, you're right in that it's always changing. Like I've been doing this since 2007 and every year is different. Like every year is uniquely difficult, right? There's always a hardest thing. In 2008, the hardest thing was selling houses. Buying houses was very easy in 2008. Selling them were very difficult. In 2022, selling houses was very easy. Buying houses was very difficult. Now in 2025, there's a new hardest thing, but there has never been a year in this whole journey where everything was easy and the wind was completely at your back. And that's real estate, right? And so now with trends is like most recently, it's a much more competitive market for sellers. So when it's competitive, that means you have to put a superior product on the market. And so in 2021, there was a lot of competition from people who were incompetent and they would put whatever product they put on the market would sell and they would make a profit, right? That doesn't work in 2025. You have to do things well. You have to come to market with the best product because there's not as many buyers. And so in some ways, it's weeded out a lot of the competition that wasn't really built to last. They were built for one particular market cycle. And so for us, it's going back to the core principles, which is how do we add value? And I think that's really important, not only in real estate, but in any business, is to understand where you add value. Because in real estate, I think there's some myths like you can add value in lots of places and you can do it from behind a computer screen, but that's really speculation. like at the end of the day, if you're going to have a sustainable business in real estate, you have to add value to the property, right? And that's the hard part. Now, you can get away with not adding value in certain market cycles, but to last and have a sustainable business, you have to add value somewhere. And for us, it's always been construction. And so that's not the easiest place to add value, but to me, it's sustainable, because if we can add value, real value with construction, then we can add value in any market cycle and it not be dependent upon, when we buy. So for us, it's doubling down on that. Like, how do we get better at construction? How do we bring a better product to market more efficiently?
Yeah, I did want to kind of dig a little bit deeper into that. So with this competitive landscape, and as you said, right now you're trying to equip your owners to be able to be competitive, and where you see the competition kind of lacking is adding the value in things like construction, right? So how are you equipping the owners for being able to add that value?
It's in the little things. Like, yes, we're constantly trying to add technology to minimize risk and to add value, but that's what we do at the franchise level. At its core, though, adding value to a property, like, who does that? It's the contractor that shows up every morning with a hammer in his hand, right? Like, that's really where the value is being added. Like, technology doesn't solve that. So it's like, how do you set that contractor up for success? And I think we like to talk about exciting things like technology and scale and all of these things, which are important. But at the end of the day, it's how do you set that contractor up for success every day? And so it's little things. It's like, what is the size of that crew? What do you have that contractor responsible for? And what do you do for him because he's not good at those things, right? Like, so it's a human being at the center of that local ecosystem, and it's old, and the small things matter. Do you give him is it a crew size of 4 or is it a crew size of 2, right? Like, when do you order the materials? What is your process for ordering them? How do you get the right items to the right place at the right time? Like, that sounds like a small thing, but if you get that wrong, you set that human being up for failure. And so a lot of the things that we do is setting that contractor up for success, and they're not necessarily sexy, but they're really important. But in 2025, just doing those things isn't enough. Like, because we're competing with hedge funds. So it's not enough just to do those old school things and those low tech things well. We have to do those. Like, you have to do those things well, but you also have to do the other competitive advantages well. Like, you still have to do the digital marketing well. You have to do the analysis well. Like, analysis is more important now than ever. And it's as tricky as it ever has been in terms of analysis. And then you have to have the capital. And so in order to succeed in 2025, all those things have to be working at a high level. And that's the hard part. And what you see is a lot of people coming to real estate, and they have a certain skill set that they've built in a different career. And it might give them a competitive advantage in one of those things, but having a competitive advantage in one of those things isn't enough. Not in 2025. It may have been in 2010, not in 2025. It's just too competitive.
Yeah, you've given me a couple pillars that you're kind of having run concurrently. I did want to ask you, I know you mentioned that, although tech is not as important, but still need to be competitive in that space. I did want to ask you if you feel like there's any momentum in terms of the tech side that you're seeing in particular, because I know you have your own platform that you're providing for the owners. Yeah. Whether that's like pricing intelligence, underwriting tools, maybe the construction scheduling. Just want to get an idea there.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of potential in visual AI. I think we're just scratching the surface of that. I think there's a bright future to that. And we're focusing more and more on that because I think that could create some competitive advantages. But I'm also really worried about overusing AI or becoming dependent on AI where we're at right now. Like, you take valuations, for example. Like, who's got the most data and done the most work on valuations? Well, Zillow. right? But would you trust Zillow with your invest? Like, would you trust their AI with your valuation of an investment? No way, because every property is so nuanced. And that's the other thing that's so difficult about scaling this particular business is everything is so hyper local and nuanced. And so I think AI will continue to get better, but I also think there's going to be a real temptation to take shortcuts with AI and get really sloppy on the analysis before it's ready to give the right answer.
No, I do agree with you there. There's been, at least in the past 2 years, there's just been quite a lot of noise in the AI space in general. I only say that because I do come from that tech background. Just in the past, I would say 4 years, there's over 40,000 different AI tools now out there, and it's just increasingly growing. So a lot of noise and not a lot of, I guess, sit down and focus on like what is actually solving the problem with these tools. So no,
Mm-hmm.
I agree with you there.
Yeah. And then how do you get like AI, like a lot of the greatest potential is AI that does very specific things, right? Like a very narrow scope, a very narrow database. And so, but then how do you avoid being siloed in the analysis, individual house analysis? So I think there's going to be a lot of people in the next few years that get burned by just getting sloppy and not doing the disciplined hard work and getting over reliant on it. It's going to be interesting. And so for us, like that's a challenge that we have is how do you leverage all this new exciting technology without getting sloppy?
Yeah, I think from personal experience, I've kind of run into that as well. For example, with prop tech, there's single family, commercial, multifamily, and all of them are very different in certain aspects. So a lot of times you would think, or I guess a lot of people in general would think, oh, I just need one solution to help me with managing all of that. But
Mm-hmm.
in the real world, that's not really the case. And what we found is, tools that are very specific to their specific niches tend
Yep.
to do a lot better.
Mm-hmm.
So coming back, I know you mentioned those are some of the challenges that you're facing as well. I did want to kind of bring it on the flip side and celebrate your wins. So when we come back to the ground level, I guess for you, what's been working really well for your network?
It goes back to empowering that franchise owner, and you can give them technology. You can give them those products like the lead generation product, the analysis product, the capital, the construction project. But that's not enough, right? Because it's a human being at the center. I think when we started franchising, we underestimated how much this is a coaching business. And so we've invested a lot in the last several years around the support and the coaching. And I'm hesitant to say support because when people say support, they think about a hotline where you have a problem, you call in and you get a solution. That's not coaching. And so coaching is much more proactive and soft skills and intangible, like how do you help people through adversity, right? Like how do you overcome fear? Like all of the things that hold business owners back. Like how do we surround them with those support systems so that they can prosper amidst adversity rather than cower in the face of adversity? And so those are the things, the progress we've made there, I think has really moved the needle for us. And it's something that we're constantly trying to improve. And we were just talking yesterday, like we've got these 4 competitive advantages and each one is kind of an individual product. And we were talking yesterday, like, I think there's a 5th thing that we don't talk about. And it's like the sinews and the things that hold all that together and surround that human being at the center of the business. And I think in a tech world, businesses where we constantly talk about scale, we often forget that at the core of scale are individual human beings that hold the responsibility for scale.
Right. Now, I can imagine as you're scaling, right, there's new owners that are joining your network. So there's probably tons of information out there, but I can only imagine they're going to feel lost in the beginning. So having that network to kind of help them coach and guide them, I could definitely see the competitive advantage of value there.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing that as well. So kind of looking into the future, within the next quarter or so, do you have measures that matter? Or do you think there's measures for you that matter the most, whether that's time to close on deals, your renovation cycle times, days on the market? What would you say is sort of like the most top of mind for you when it comes to that?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think in a market like this that is changing pretty fast, like you look back at the last 12 months, we've been through a few different micro cycles. It's really important to get in and out of deals quickly because the longer you're in a deal, the more you are exposed to market risk that you don't control, right? But then at the same time, like our opportunity are projects where we can add a lot of value with construction. So our typical projects, we're spending $80,000, $90,000 on the rehab. And these are 1,400 square foot houses. So these are houses that there's a lot of improvement to do. And so those are great deals for us. That's where we can add the value. But then how do we get in and out fast and minimize our exposure and our risk? That comes down to a lot of things, but probably most importantly is quantifying the risk of projects. That seems like an obvious thing, but I don't think residential real estate investors are good at quantifying risk. I think commercial investors are very good at quantifying risk. Residential real estate investors are not good at this. And so we've really put a lot of time in our technology of quantifying the risk of this project versus the risk of that project. It might not be the most profitable project that we choose. A lot of times the most profitable on a spreadsheet is going to be the one with the most risk, right? And so how do you balance that? And so we try to quantify that and be very strategic. And so I think being smarter with purchases is important. Like going back to 2021, like anything you bought in 2021 was going to make money. Right? The challenge was buying it. You'd figure out by the time you sold it, it was a bit of a cheat code in 2021. And now you have like the fundamentals matter again. And so there's the quantification of the risk, but then it's the execution of the construction project. The difference between executing at a high level and being sloppy is the difference between being in and out in 4 months on a big project like this and being out in 12 months. That's the difference between success and failure. And so that execution is a lot of little things. It's a lot of discipline things, it's processes, but there's also an element of leadership there. And it's like, how do you take your how do you leverage your leadership skills on that job site in your construction ecosystem to get in and out of these faster? So it's a lot of different things. But when you talk about metrics, that cycle time, I think, is probably one of the most important things in this particular market.
In relation to that, then, where do you feel like, for the cycle time at least, where do you feel like is the biggest friction point for franchise owners?
It's that contractor at the center of it. It's like we've got these ideas, we've got these metrics, we've got the KPIs. We know how long a project should take because we've done this so many times, and we know how long it should take to switch out of vanity. We know how many hours that should take. We know how long these projects should take. But the person at the center that's adding the value is not looking at KPIs. Like, they're not behind a computer screen. they're a skilled tradesman swinging a hammer on your job site. And so how do you translate your sense of urgency and set him up for success and create that same sense of urgency for him? It becomes a bit of a catch-22, because how do you attract that high quality person, that high quality contractor? Well, it's giving them the certainty that when they finish this job, you're going to have another deal waiting for them, right? So volume is really important. And so that's how we get good contractors, is volume. And so that gives them security. But then the flip side of that is they know another job is coming. And so how do you balance that security to keep that high quality person with the sense of urgency, and how do you continue to motivate them? And that's why I say, like, a lot of that goes back to old-fashioned leadership, right? And like, how do you lead a team? How do you motivate a team? And the cool thing about this business is it's a very small team. Like, there's very few transactions and there's very few humans involved. It's beautiful that way, right? Like, to have this kind of financial upside in any other business, you'd have to do tons of transactions, have lots of employees. Real estate's different. It's a small team, but everybody's important. So you've got to lead that small team, and every transaction matters.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you for going deeper into that. So it does sound like it's the construction operations that's kind of where you have the most friction. And you're kind of looking to, I guess, resolve any of the friction points there.
I think it's just always the hardest part. Like, whether it's 2007 or it's 2025, the hardest part is always adding real value to that property. It's also where you mitigate risk, right? Like, if you can't do that, then you're always speculating.
Yeah. So for the business and trying to make it to the next chapter, it does sound like that's probably going to be your major challenge as well as your bottleneck. Do you have thoughts as to how you can kind of get out of that in order to reach the next chapter for the franchise?
Yeah, well, the franchise is built for that challenge. And so if we were trying to do that with employees, I don't think there's a road to success. And you look at large entities that have tried it. You look at Zillow, you look at Open Door, just go down the list. None of them have been good at this. So none of them have been good at adding the actual value to the actual house, right? And so they've gotten the tech stuff right. They've hired tons of employees. But when you get down to adding value at scale, that's where they failed. And those business models have failed and they've pulled back. And so I don't think there is a road to success with scaling this business with employees. And that's why we have embraced the franchise model. So we are not tackling this project with this problem with employees and middle managers. We are tackling this problem by empowering owners on the ground. And so our owners are the hero of the story. Like, they're the ones making these decisions. They're the ones that are leading on the ground. They're the ones that's ultimately analyzing the risk level and taking ownership of those projects. And so we're not having to scale 55 locations centrally. We've got 55 owners that we have to empower to do those things. And that's exciting. That's the exciting thing about franchising, and the unique thing about it. It's just doing it in this particular space is a bit unique.
No, it does sound like your franchise owners are trying to operate in a leaner model, and so are your teams, correct? I did want to ask, are you leveraging, you've kind of touched on this a little bit, where you're experimenting with different AI tools, for example. Are there other emerging technologies that you and your teams are using today?
Well, the holy grail is valuation, right? Like, that is the holy grail in real estate technology. And it is a difficult one. And I think it hasn't made as much progress as I thought it would. Like, I don't know that Zillow valuations now, if you've got a neighborhood, if you've got a homogeneous neighborhood, like, Zillow's great, but in urban locations, it's much more accurate. But I think what most people in prop tech don't understand is that most of America and most of American housing is not in the big metro cities and in big neighborhoods. It's in middle America. It's rural. So we're located in East Tennessee. So that's where we learned real estate. And so it's kind of unique that we're into prop tech from here, because most people in prop tech are coming from Seattle, San Francisco, and New York. But those tools are built for urban areas and high density. And so I think one of the big challenges is, how do you make these tools work for the rest of America, where most people actually live? And as an industry, I don't think a lot of progress has been made there. And so we are working ourselves on taking some models and trying to do some work there, because the math that works in an urban area, that math doesn't work in a rural area, and vice versa. And so it's almost like what we're finding is we're going to have to create two different models. And I think historically, everybody's applied the metro model to the rest of America. And I think that explains partly why we're not seeing the progress.
Yeah.
It's a
So
big
it
challenge,
sounds like,
really difficult.
yeah, it sounds like the most practical application of that is, like you said, valuation pricing. That's sort of the area you feel like has the greatest potential for evolutionizing this industry. So I guess in terms of that, it sounds like, if you have pricing and valuation intelligence that's separate for urban environments versus suburbs and rural, that would probably be a lot better than what most prop tech companies are doing, where it's kind of, they just generalize everything is what it seems like.
Well, I think they rely on averages. And one of the things that we've learned is averages in real estate are they're not only useless, they're misleading, because averages can be like, if you rely on averages, you're good. It's like it's misleading, right? It like leads to really bad analysis. And so many of the models will use, and agents do this too. Like they take comps and then they average them, but averages are useless. Like almost every average used in real estate is useless.
Mm-hmm. Every city, every town is going to be different, right? So, yeah.
Every end of the block, like you've got school systems, you've got all these hyper local nuances. And so we're seeing where I personally see the brightest future is like partners that we work with that are pulling a lot of different data points and are beginning and using visual imagery and beginning to pull all of these nuanced little local pieces together. And ultimately, I think that will lead to better valuations, but it's still going to be a different algorithm for urban areas than it is rural areas. And so there's a lot of work to be done before they can be trustworthy.
I definitely agree with you there. I feel like there's still definitely a lot of opportunity just coming from prop tech as well. So I did want to go into your leadership as well as a little bit more personal. So I know outside of the franchise world, you're a tennis player and you're also developing the Bristol Sportsplex, which is, a multi-venue sports complex with pickleball courts, tennis courts, all of that. So that being a little bit different from what you normally do, how did that teach you about operations and guest experience? And how have you kind of carried that back into franchising?
Wow, we could do a whole podcast on that because, whew, yeah. You go into a different business and you think what you know is transferable, like learned all these things in franchising and real estate. And you think a lot of that is going to be transferable. And then you get into a new business and you realize like those rules that applied over there they don't apply here. Like even leadership. And I see people coming into real estate that make the same mistake. Like they may have had success as a physician or a corporate leader. And they think,
Okay.
I can do real estate. Well, yeah, like, no, it's different rules. Like the nuances matter and you have to like work really hard to learn them. And so I think the learning curve is higher and steeper than we ever expect it to be. And so that business is very, very different. It's a high volume, low margin kind of businesses with what you said, like individual experiences and lots of customers and employees, things that just a very different animal than real estate and franchising. So I've learned a lot, and it's really interesting to me to see how much doesn't translate from one to the other. It's like you have to put a different hat on over here.
Yeah. So for our listeners, if a new owner is listening today, what's one operating habit that you would encourage them to build in their first 90 days?
For any business owner or real estate in particular?
I would like to get your insight on both because you've experienced both, I would say. So,
yeah. So ask me that one more time.
Sure. So for new owners who are just now getting started, what is an operating habit that you would encourage them when they're building their first 90 days? So that could be in real estate, but also for other high volume businesses like what you were experiencing. It's
Yeah.
two different ball games. So if you have insights into both, that would be great.
Yeah. So I would say the very first thing there's a lot of things I could say here, but I think before any of those, and this is going to sound cliche, but you need to really identify your own strengths and weaknesses. Like, what are you good at? Like, you in 2025, you have to have a competitive advantage in anything, right? Like, everything is competitive. It doesn't matter whether it's pickleball courts or tennis courts or flipping houses. Like, everything is hyper competitive. You have to create a competitive advantage. And in 2025, it's probably not enough to have one competitive advantage. Like, you have to have multiple competitive advantages, right? But we're just one person. And as a founder, when you're starting a business, your weaknesses are exposed. And I think part of that is because you have to compete, you have to create multiple competitive advantages, but you're just one person. And so it sounds cliche, but I think you have to be really honest about what am I good at? Where can I add a competitive advantage? And what other competitive advantage do I need to be successful that I don't have? Right? And then figure out, how do I do both of those things? How much capital is it going to take to create the competitive advantages that I can't personally create? Right? And be honest about that. Because what I see a lot is people not having that level of self-awareness. And then when their weaknesses are exposed, and they will be, it's like they're undercapitalized, or they haven't partnered with the right people, right? They partnered with people with the same skill sets. And part of the difficulty is when you're in a new business, like you don't know what weaknesses are going to be exposed. And so I think part of that first 90 days is having really deep conversations with people that have done it, and not be arrogant in those conversations. Because like what I learned with the Sportsplex is what I knew a lot from this other thing. I knew nothing about this new thing. Like, approach those conversations with a lot of humility, right? And really listen. What do you need to be able to do here that you don't have? Then go back and like, how am I going to do this? And what resources is it going to take? Because because the world is so competitive, it is going to take more resources than you originally think.
No, that's a great answer. I feel like that's applicable regardless of what industry, real estate, sportsplex, even for me in consulting. I think that could be applied everywhere. So no, thank you for that. So just quickly here, I did also want to ask you personally, what are you most excited for in the future?
Wow, man, it is so exciting to see. I'm a coach by nature. Like, we didn't talk about this, but my first career was coaching in college. And when you're a coach, like, you can't turn that off. Like, you just thrive on seeing other people be successful and to improve at what they're doing. And so the thing that's most exciting to me, and I think our team here, is just seeing franchise owners be successful. And they often came from something that they didn't enjoy, and to be really successful at something that continues to excite me. But that's where I'm wired, because like, I'm coaching 6 and 7-year-old soccer players right now. And so that is also exciting. That's also exciting to me. And so you can't turn that, when you have the coaching and the teaching gene, you can't turn that off. So I've learned that about myself. And it's probably the same thing that's going to get me excited 20 years from now. That and getting better at tennis. I'm obsessed with tennis. I am absolutely obsessed. I picked up tennis in my mid 40s, very late in life, and I've been obsessed ever since. And I'm excited about that. Just wish I could get better.
I was going to ask you, because I did see that you're a big tennis player, and I know with the Sportsplex, you're kind of splitting it between tennis courts and pickleball courts. And I know there's a little bit of that heated rivalry between pickleball players and tennis players, but we won't get into all of that today. But maybe next time, if we have a conversation, we could kind of talk about that. So Matt, thank you again. Before we close, thank you again for joining us and providing the listeners with your insights. I'm going to go ahead and just quickly recap and summarize what we discussed today for the listeners. So what we did today with Matt is he shared his journey about him leading and founding New Again Houses as one of the best real estate franchises in the country. We talked about the current market trends as well as industry signals that we've been seeing and how that's influenced Matt's decisions for his business growth. We've also heard about what's been working well for New Again Houses, as well as what are some of the challenges that we've been facing. And then we've also learned about some of the emerging technologies that Matt's been interested in and some of the opportunities to enable them practically for the business. And then lastly, Matt also shared personally what he does outside of the franchise, as well as what he has interest in with coaching and also sharing any advices as well as additional insights for new owners. So again, Matt, thank you. And then for listeners who want to learn more, they can check out newagainhouses.com or franchise.newagainhouses.com to see how the model works and where the brand is going next. And then if you also want to hear more from Matt, you could actually go and check out his podcast, which is Find a Way, where you can discover stories about different leaders and coaches and other interesting people. So I'm Aaron Park, and this is Industry Innovators. If you enjoyed today's episode, please give a follow and share, and I'll see you next time.